This week on Winemakers Uncorked, we're in Oregon, which is known as Pinot Country, especially the Willamette Valley, though all kinds of grapes are grown here. Oregon has a unique climate that makes wines of distinction, and it's easy to see why Oregon Pinots are growing in popularity.
The reason people come to us is we're the highest end of the acid spectrum for domestic Pinot Noir. So we build very classic Pinot Noir that can age.
I've always been a cut-up, but this is really going that extra mile.
I think if you try to fight Mother Nature, she's always going to win. You can fight her and beat her when you're getting things in barrel quantities, but I think it ends up making a wine that is hard. As we say, asses and elbows are sticking out. It's obvious. If you let her make the wine, it's spherical.
Undeniable deliciousness is the place I'm always trying to get to.
Jim Prosser, the owner of J.K. Carrier Wines, has ageable Pinots from a stunning hilltop vineyard.
I can't control a lot of this stuff, but I can control what I farm and what I put in bottle. And I think the emperor should always be wearing his clothes at whatever price point that you buy my wine. I'm about the work, I'm about the craft.
So you're going to see that Oregon is very different from Washington State. Washington State's a high desert. This, as you're going to see, is mostly mountaintop vineyards and lots of vegetation. Jim showed up with his dog Yoshi, who may have just a touch of dingo in him.
Nice to meet you guys. I'm Jim Prosser.
Hey Jim, I'm Jim Angle.
Nice to meet you.
Good morning, George Angle.
George, nice to meet you. It's a fetching coat you got on there.
Yeah, he's the flashiest member of the family.
You match my
Well,
dog.
yeah, I've got some
You
little
do match
background.
the dog.
I got a little background, and I know that today was the beige tones. So,
All right, so let's see, what do we got going today? We got a fence line that could probably use, put a knife on it. We got some rocks that probably need to be picked. We could potentially grab some machetes.
now when I was serving part of my sentence, I was breaking rocks. I don't know if you need them broken or moved from one area to the other.
You let me know what they look like.
Okay.
You have the familiarity.
Well, this is a beautiful spot, Jim. This is fabulous.
We're on a hill at 700 feet, which is called Parrot Mountain, and it pretty well represents the viticulture practices in Oregon.
Jim invited us into the tasting room to try a couple of wines.
How about some bubbles, fellas?
Talk us into it.
Let's just see what happens here. My wife believes that bubbles don't count towards the bottle tally at the end of the night. It's just something you start with, and then you go to wine.
Is there a pouring strategy on the bubbles?
We try to limit it to unsavory characters like yourselves. Too expensive.
Too expensive. Okay.
Salut. Huh?
Salute.
So this is from 2011. It's Blanc de Noir. In other words, it's 100% Pinot Noir. This is made method Champenoise, so just like you'd expect out of Champagne, but we're here in Oregon. Screaming acidity. I'm always at the highest end of the acid spectrum, and this is no doubt about it. And if you're gonna build at this level, you better build at the level of what they call grower champagne. Not the grand marks, which try to produce the same wine every year ad infinitum, but just absolutely the best thing you can pull out of your vineyard.
Jim invited us into the tasting room where he mapped out what kinds of wines he makes.
All right, guys, we're gonna taste out of this barrel. I'm gonna get some wine out and we're just gonna check it out. This we just pulled from a barrel from 2018. This wine is, I build substantial wines, they got broad shoulders on them. They need to be in barrel for 18 months. So this has got another year almost in barrel that it's gonna be there. It's in pretty good shape, pretty substantial wine. We kind of need to round the shoulders off on the wine. Highest end of the acid spectrum for domestic Pinot Noir, reasonably high heft. Basically, I have enough acid in my wines that I want to balance that wine with some substantial, right? So that in the end, what you get is a balanced wine that tastes good, but it's not strawberry, raspberry essence. It's just kind of an old way, and it's the way that my palate is dialed. This wine will reflect that. This 2018 is huge. If you look at the color, it's super dark. It should taste better than licking the floor, but we'll find out.
Well, Jim has been known to lick the floor, but
Only when I spill wine.
well, yeah, exactly.
There's some tannin structure there. It's young, it's hanging your lips on your teeth a little bit, but if you want to build wine to age, and we produce some of the most ageable Pinot Noir in the US, you've got to have structure there. You have to have high acid because Pinot Noir goes to bed on acid. But you also need some tannin in there, the other side of structure. Pinot Noir is about balance, and it's a connoisseur's wine because it's also in that balance about subtlety. You know, you go deep in something. I don't care if it's stamp collecting or...
Just the opposite of my humor. Not very subtle.
It's not very deep.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. But you're exploring these things to go further at some point later in your life.
Well, we come from a line of long livers. I had an uncle that had a liver that long. So
that's good from a drinking perspective.
Jim, like every vineyard owner, is a hard-working guy, so he couldn't pass up the opportunity to get some free labor. The sun is pretty bright in the vineyards, so Jim was nice enough to loan me one of his hats.
This is a canopy, right? This is the power that's producing all the sugar and ripening and the grapes. What we're trying to do is keep that canopy cut down. We want to keep the engine smaller so that that engine runs for a longer time. In Oregon, traditionally, harvest has been in October, and we are pretty routinely now in the last 5 or 6 years stepped into September, and it's I'd prefer to go back the other direction because with additional time you're going to get additional complexity. So let me see this here. This is a machete, right?
Yeah.
It's super sharp, really super thin, and what we would want to do is most vineyard managers would let the canopy fill into here. What we're going to do is we're going to keep the canopy just above the level of the trellis. So, and you don't want to lose this, you're like this.
Oh, I see.
And the way you come through is kind of an angle. You actually end up doing both sides when the canopy gets bigger.
Free labor is worth what you pay for it, but this may be the hardest I've ever seen George work. Watching George swing a machete makes you want to run for the tasting room.
Jim decided that he was going to go bankrupt if he kept us working on his vines, and so he took us to another area to pick up rocks.
After moving rocks, George didn't feel like walking back to the winery, so he got a ride instead. We sat down in the tasting room with Jim to try some of his wines and learn more about his style.
We did our work. We did some work.
We did a little work,
We'll work on the work. But I wanted to taste you on the wines, on some of the wines, all right? So the first wine I'm going to pour for you is what we call a white Pinot Noir. It's called Glass. The best way to think about this wine, that we call a white Pinot Noir, but is clearly a rosé, is bubbles without the bubbles. It's made like an 1895 rosé champagne without the bubbles. We put it in barrel fermented cold and under pressure to build the big fruit esters in the wine so it tastes sweet even though we take it to complete dryness. And when it's completely dry, we stop the fermentation and we use an extinct champagne methodology to strip the color out. We add Chardonnay lees, basically the dead yeast cells from a Chardonnay fermentation. We stir it twice a week for 3 months. It takes the wine from the color of Pinot down to the color of white Pinot Noir, or onion skin, basically. Yeah, it's 80 degrees back patio is the place for the wine.
Well, it is lovely, and you're right. This is a patio wine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Summer patio wine.
This is called Lucidité. 2 bookends for Chardonnay are tropical fruit oak and butter and savory acid mineral, right? Those are the 2 extremes.
Right.
This falls more into the latter spectrum. So I want linearity to it. I want a lot of acid being pulled there. I don't really care about having it taste like a super Honeycrisp cereal in the morning.
Clean, crisp, refreshing.
Okay, gents, it's time. We're stepping up a little bit here.
All right.
Now, this is called St. Dolores Estate. That's this at the winery. My mom, not a saint, more of a shit stirrer. She's Canadian, had 7 kids, so it gets you close to canonization, but doesn't get you all the way there.
Well, Jim saw a sign once that said "Drink Canada Dry," he drove up there and tried.
It's pretty good. That made the best one all day.
He's never tried that on me before.
And so this is the 5 best barrels off of my estate. The typicity of this vineyard is both structured and juicy at the same time. It's not that that's unheard of, it's just not very common to have both. You usually have one side of that coin or the other. And so this wine has got a lot of weight, a lot of structure. I had a Burgundy consultant that I knew when I worked there that came through and thought this was the closest thing to a Grand Cru or a Premier Cru wine that we made. And so this is a pretty easy 12 to 20 year kind of aging horizon. Screaming acidity, but it's got a lot of power to it as well. And this ultimately, where those two meet, where power meets grace, is what I'm most interested in.
Now, which part of your vineyard is this particular grape from?
This is from, I don't know if you guys can see it or not, there's a block out here called the Two Trees block. And it's Wadensville clone Pinot Noir, and it's right out the window there, and because it has 2 big 85-foot, Douglas fir trees sitting in the middle of it, because I'm a winemaker that likes trees. Because they cast shadows, they hold birds, they suck up water, sometimes they drop limbs, sometimes they fall over in your vineyard to spring your canopy, but I still like them.
Well, I'm going to tell you, if these grapes came from where the 2 trees are, I think you should open up a branch office. Put those 2 trees somewhere else and let's repeat this.
You have my sympathy.
Cheers.
Jim Prosser likes to make age-worthy wines, and he broke out a 2006 Pinot to prove the point.
All right, guys. This is older. This is one of our library selections. We always pour something to show you that I'm not completely full of shit when I talk to you about my wines. When I say they age, that they do in fact age. So this happens to be a 2006. Warm growing year, required you to not let it get overripe and boozy and jammy. What my wines will do is what good Burgundies do. In the first 3 years, they'll put on heft, and then they go on their run of complexing and go towards cigar box and saddle leather and those kind of characters. If you like to drink your wine on the fruit end of things, drink it earlier. It still tastes pretty good. But what I like about drinking older wine is there's things there that you couldn't otherwise associate with fruit.
The nose on it is fabulous. His 2006 Pinot was from the St. Dolores block, and we drank it as we looked out over the vineyard. We said goodbye to Jim and Yoshi after a wonderful day of tasting and viewing their beautiful vineyards. The story of E-I-E-I-O is a nursery rhyme turned into a wine and a character turned into a winemaker.
Winery is named E-I-E-I-O. It's spelled E-I-E-I-O. It's in Carlton, Oregon, USA.
All right, George, so we're going to E-I-E-I-O, which is owned by Farmer McDonald. You can figure out how he got there, can't you?
I'd say with the Chardonnay that's in the hay, with the Pinot Noir that will go far, what do you got? What would you do?
Whatever I say is better than Chardonnay in the hay.
Well, let's hear something.
I'd say with a sip sip here and a sip sip there.
Well, I'll have a quip quip here and a quip quip there.
Oh,
Welcome,
Good morning.
thank you.
Jay McDonald, E-I-E-I-O. Jim, glad to meet you.
I'm George Angle.
George, I'm Jay. This is my little place.
My younger, flashier
Yeah,
brother.
just a little flashier.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not looking down. Those boots are pretty flashy. Yeah.
Looks like he came from Fort Worth Stockyards.
Did you?
Just got out of the road.
Starting to smell
I'm
like
from
it, too.
Fort Worth. Well, I'm an entrepreneur.
Oh,
So it's,
Oh, no. It's already starting.
yeah, that's sad. You ready to drink
you bet.
or just taste? Which one?
I'll do both.
Okay.
My wife says I have no taste, so maybe I'll just drink.
Okay.
Oh, that's your excuse?
I've been to some tailgate parties, but this is going to be special.
Well, this is a special tailgate party for sure. This is my Cuvée E Chardonnay. On the back, it's very obvious. There'll be an E, an I, or an O. So E is for easy drinking every day, excellent value. I is for in between, and O is for overpriced.
You know, I've never had wine from a beaker, but I think in this case I could become a beaker creature.
Well, I've learned that what you look for in a glass is one that doesn't leak. There you go.
That's a good approach.
Yeah, well, cheers. Thanks again for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Is this aged in oak?
Correct. This is done under the pre-oxidized method. Grapes come in, they're squeezed, let it sit out for a while as juice, and it oxidizes and turns dark brown. Then you go to barrel, and it starts fermenting in barrel all on its own, and usually 18 to 22 months later, then I go to bottle. So it's an extended time in oak, but the oak flavor is not pronounced. That's what it's supposed to be. Something that's not too serious, but serious enough.
I can see George drinking this out by his pool.
You said the oak flavor was not pronounced. There's so many things that I don't pronounce, so.
So many things you can't pronounce. So Jay says Old MacDonald is actually his dad, that he is middle-aged MacDonald, but his wine is still called E-I-E-I-O.
There's a very famous song with the 2 to 4-year-old set called Old MacDonald Had a Farm,
Okay.
E-I-E-I-O.
I believe I recall that.
Last name's MacDonald. I'm middle-aged MacDonald. That's the music.
This is fantastic. I've never seen a cork with a storyline to go with it. In fact, I think I'm going to dub this the Supreme Cork.
Oh man, this is sad. Where's the vodka?
Yeah, we may need to upgrade.
Yeah.
The things that George says are just as ridiculous as the way he dresses.
Swine wine, that's what it's called in the back there. We also call it Wilbur's Reserve. And Charlotte's Choice.
Sure, I got it.
Yeah. So it's also a Pinot Noir, and the only difference between the swine wine and everything else, this is predominantly pressed juice. Nothing wrong with pressed juice, it's just a way to be a purist about what I'm doing in the wine business. This is about 80% pressed juice and then 20%, other, but it's mostly neutral oak. I think there's any on this at all, any new oak at all.
This has a couple of levels of flavors in it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's got more going on than the price would, would suggest. So we're gonna jump into single vineyard wines, at least 4 different vineyards, and these are just representative of the vineyard. That doesn't mean they're better than the Cuvée E, I, or O. It just means that they more or less give you an idea what the vineyard is giving you. So we'll start with the Yates Conwell Vineyard, which is right next door to me here.
It has a beautiful color to it, but it's also lighter. You can see every line in your hand through the wine.
If you can't see through a Pinot Noir, it's not Pinot Noir. That means somebody added something to it, either another grape variety, or they used enzymes to get more color extraction.
Oh, that's tasty.
We'll go on to Saffron Fields. So this is a Saffron Fields vineyard, but also a single block. So the one block is all Wädenswil clone, which is a clone that's in Switzerland, planted pretty well, and it's known for floral aromatics and texture.
Yeah, this has more of a nose on it. Jay invited us to go look at the vineyards from which he sources grapes. I got in the front, George got in the back. Jay not only showed us the vineyard, he wanted us to walk all the way to the top of one of the rows so we could look down on the Pinot.
This is a great site. The Conwells saved all the trees, and so the Chardonnay is partially shaded. This is an artist interpretation of the map on my wine here. This is the E-I-E-I-O 2016 Yates Conwell Own Rooted. So it shows the sections that are in green are where the grapes came from in this bottle. And we are currently right near the very top, this point right here. We're about, 40 feet from the top, I would guess? Yeah.
Now here's a very specific question. You've got vines at the top of the hill and vines at the bottom of the hill. I know that you come out and taste the grape, the stem, you taste everything. Can you tell a difference between the top and the bottom of even the same?
Yeah,
It's
huge. Up on the top, they're gonna be riper sooner because the water all flows downhill. But when I pick the whole thing at once. So you're gonna get super ripe and maybe some underripe at the end, but blending it all together, it's pretty impressive.
Okay.
The second vineyard Jay took us to was even more beautiful than the first. You know, there's something so comforting about looking at vineyards, the parallel rows. There's something very calming about it.
I think what it is they're plants. They don't talk back to you. So we just walked down this row right here. and coming from the north down here. So we're right in this little corner right here of the entire vineyard.
Finally, we said goodbye to Jay and the EIEIO operation.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Jay.
I appreciate your input and your wisdom and your humor.
Well, thank you very much.
Now, wait a minute. Did you hear wisdom from my brother?
Wisdom, yeah.
Yeah, you got some in there, did you?
That's good.
Man, appreciate
I've been
it.
listening to him for years. I haven't heard any yet.
Well, you might have to clean out those ears.
Thank you so much, Jay. Great man.
Sure.
Enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming.
Good
It was a good
talking
time.
with you.
Yeah, great.
Thanks.
Have fun with that wine.
I'll be able to point out exactly where we were. Is this the correct?
Where you had your heart attack and everything. That's good.
Where the medevac helicopter landed.
Yeah.
It'll be
Put you back with the shocks. Good.
George and I had a wonderful time visiting Oregon and Oregon winemakers. Of course, I had to listen to him all day, but the wines made it worth it.
It's a 40-acre property. I have 25 acres of grapes. The spacing is pretty tight, but what it amounts to is 38,000 vines that need me or somebody that looks like me or is shorter than me to stand in front of those vines about 13 times a year and do something. Raise a wire, move a cane, all these kinds of things. So there's enough work to go around. If you go deep into something you give a damn about, it's one of the shortcuts to happiness.
I thought the Grim Reaper was coming for my brother, but it turned out to be Jim Prosser with a scythe to clear weeds.
You have a question for me?
You asked you something new.
what the question was.
This is wine. It's made from grapes.
Okay, let's start out with the basic. You know, I drank a lot of Pinot Noir in Oregon. In fact, I drank so much Pinot Noir in Oregon that I was going to the restroom every 10 minutes. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Pinot Noir, but I began hoping for some Pinot More.